smell from taste. That's sort of what we call the chemical impressions on our tongue versus in our nose. But the chemical sensing comes from sort of the same origins, and it's about finding our way to a nutrient source, basically, and moving away from toxins in the environment. So smelling and tasting sort of blends together when we go very far back, and that's critical for survival. And also in our bodies, the cells communicate via chemicals. So it's like a chemical communication between the cells in our bodies, which consists of billions of different cells. But it's very fundamental to any kind of biological life.
Yeah, and it's still, even in the 21st century, smell is still critical for our survival as human beings, right? It's the reason why the scent is added to natural gas, right? Or I was just joking with the staff the other day. The first thing that someone does when they pull something out of the fridge that they're not sure of is they ask their partner, "Can you smell this?" Right? So I mean, like, we're constantly using it, but on the flip side of that, do human beings have a good sense of smell? Because I don't know, I look around the animal world. I mean, just even my dog, who I was walking this morning, and I think he is processing so much more of the world that is invisible to me because of the acuteness of his nose.
Yeah, and so my argument here would be that the dog is not it's an unfair comparison, because they are really supreme. They're the olfactory kings and queens in the animal kingdom, because they have a really developed olfactory capacity. But the human species is not too far behind, actually. And when there is systematic comparisons made regarding our sensitivities in relation to other animals in terms of how faint smells can we detect, we perform quite well, and even better than most other animals that have been studied. And the example of natural gas is one example. This molecule that is added to the gas, people can recognize that in the parts per billion range. So you need very small quantities to detect this odor.
Oh, so interesting. Okay, so then in that case, where would you say that we should focus more on? Like, what would we research about smell? I mean, take me back to when you said one of the challenges is that it's very hard to measure its impact. Is that because its impact is largely subjective, as you said?
Yeah, so, well, it's hard to contain a smell and to present it in objective quantities, which is a sort of if you want to do experimental research, you need to have pretty complex machinery, and sometimes you have to build these machines yourselves. We have developed a smell machine that you can hold in your hand, and that we can use for VR related experiments. So you can walk around, and in the virtual environment you can pick up things and press a button in your hand controller so that it releases a smell or a mixture of different smells. This took us years to actually build this machine, and consumed an entire research grant. And so these are not things that you can buy off the shelf. So if you want to do innovative smell research, you need a lot of technology, and also the sense of smell is quite variable. People vary a lot just in their basic acuity, but also which smells they prefer versus which ones they can't stand. The personal memories are so variable, and I think, but that's part of what makes the sense of smell unique. That we have these very strong, but also very individual experiences with smells. But we have to kind of overcome that challenge and realize not every person is going to be the same. So we're going to have to do research in a different way.
Yeah, and so how much then of the smell preferences have to do with cultural factors, not just individual ones?
That's really debated, actually. There is a notion that within each culture there are some individuals that just like things that other people find weird. So in my culture, it's fermented herring. I love it.
I love it too, by the way.
Oh,
I know it's
that's
crazy.
great to hear.
Go on, go on.
I like you already. In other cultures, there are other things like local kind of extreme traditional cuisines that some people like and some other people hate, but that tends to be minority in each culture, and then there's like a mainstream kind of culture that is more in agreement across different languages and across different cultures. So the sense of smell varies on an individual by individual level. The cultural effects are also there, but I think they are less pronounced than just the differences between individuals, because each person has their own olfactory genetic makeup. So we have different genes that are turned on and off, and that, according to some estimates, that determine about 30% of why we like or dislike certain things. Just the genetics in our olfactory receptors. And there are, as you said in the beginning, there are 400 different types of receptors, but there are millions of receptors in the nasal cavity. So it's a very powerful system that we have to detect smells.
I see. But tell me more about this pickled herring. Why did you use that as an example?
Yeah, pickled herring is actually distinct from the fermented kind, which is the surströmming. So surströmming is fermented, and a pickled food is a pretty popular cuisine nowadays.
Forgive me. So I was confusing the two. Okay, I'm a pickled herring fan, so not necessarily fermented one.
Yeah. So the next step then is for you to try the fermented type, which is very strong smelling, and most people have a hard time with it, but you can learn to appreciate it, I'm sure. And I'm a big fan. It's popular in the north of Sweden, where I'm from, but even in the north, there are many people who can't stand it. So it's the individual variation that comes into play here.
Well, given that you said there's also some genetic influence, is the passion for fermented herring shared throughout your family?
It's a mix, actually. So it's about 50-50. So perhaps I got it on those fermented herring genes. I got it on my mother's side. She loves it too, whereas my dad can't stand it, and neither can my sister.
Well, a little bit later, I want to talk. We'll talk in detail about what happens when people lose their sense of smell, because, as you mentioned, I think COVID was a time where globally, all of a sudden, the importance of this sense was brought into sharp relief. But before we get there, on the other end of the spectrum, there's this group of people known as super tasters, right? For example, like my mother, she has always been highly, highly sensitive to smells, like even sometimes when I can't even smell them. And to the point where she has a visceral reaction, whether positive or negative, to different smells. And at the same time, she is a super taster. Like, she can take a bite of something, and as she's eating it, she can discern the individual different ingredients almost. What's different about the physiology of people who have that capacity versus those of us who are more who have more quotidian abilities for olfactory sense?
Yeah, so the difference appears on different levels, I would say. You have the number of receptors, the type of receptor that will allow you to detect certain notes in a food source that other people don't detect. That's a kind of a predictor of how you will perceive the food. But there's also this aspect of emotional reactivity to the food, and that is a more central level. That's something that happens in the brain, but we tend to confuse these two. So people who say that they have a very sensitive nose, they might have a pretty average sensitivity, but they are quite reactive. So they feel a lot when they smell and taste things, and they attribute that to kind of a sensitive nose, but it is a type of emotional sensitivity that comes into play here. So flavors affect us differently at different levels of processing. And it's not entirely clear just subjectively where our individual disposition is taking us. But so that's why you have to do rigorous scientific testing to see. For example, my first research study was about pregnant women, and a lot of them felt that they had a very sensitive sense of smell during pregnancy.
Yes.
But what we found when we tested them on very faint substances is that they performed just as well as the control group, but they reacted very strongly to the smells when they were there. So it was not about being able to smell smells that they couldn't smell before, but they reacted and completely different. So it was more on a reactivity level, and that is thought to be protective of the child, basically.
Yes, I went through the exact same thing twice, and in retrospect, it's like it's the beginning of the change for a pregnant woman for the entire rest of your life. You will be constantly thinking about someone else, right? Feeling protective of someone else, and it makes a lot of sense that this primal sense is. Would be a part of that transformation. But Professor Olofsson, stand by for just a moment. We have so much more to talk about research that should be on the horizon if we want to understand our sense of smell even better. This is On Point.